Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our presentation by Debbie Aidelman, the Education and Development Coordinator for Brain Injury Alliance of New Jersey. She's giving us this presentation here at the East Brunswick Public Library. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Thank you for inviting me to the East Brunswick Public Library. It's my pleasure to have the opportunity to spend some time with you this evening to talk. We're hoping to increase public and professional awareness about brain injury and domestic violence. And as you may be aware, the term domestic violence also synonym with intimate partner violence. So throughout this presentation, you may see both terms, domestic violence and interpersonal violence. But I do have a little bit of a disclaimer I always like to start off with. Although I'm one of the education coordinators at the Brain Injury Alliance of New Jersey, I am not a medical professional. I'm not a doctor or a nurse. We have about 40 people on staff. We're located in North Brunswick, and all of our services are statewide, but we're not doctors or nurses. And we don't give medical advice. We speak to groups of 5 and we speak to groups of 50 statewide about the preventable causes of traumatic brain injury. And when we talk about fall prevention, sometimes we get questions from audiences like, should I take this medication with that medication? And the only correct answer to that question is ask your medical professional. So that's my personal disclaimer. I want to, and now it's not advancing to the next slide. Hold on one second. We'll get into this slide presentation. Okay. Thank you. So what I'm going to be talking to you about tonight is an overview of brain injury. I'm going to be talking about identifying the relationship between domestic violence and brain injury, and also exploring issues and implications related to brain injury and domestic violence. And one of the things we always say to audiences when we start off presentations is, do you know of someone who has had a brain injury? It's really much more common than you realize. When we speak to audiences, there are so many people that approach us. We do health fairs statewide. And when people come over to our exhibit table at a health fair and we pose that question, do you know of someone with a who has sustained a brain injury, a friend, family member, child, grandchild? So many people have stories that they think they've had a brain injury, they're not sure, they think they've had concussions, they think they might have been injured playing sports when they were a child, or they have a child or grandchild themselves who they are concerned about. They just don't have the diagnosis that it was a brain injury. So for the most part, it's a hidden disability. It's a silent epidemic. It's underreported, undertreated, underdiagnosed. If you don't go to the doctor or the ER after the injury, you probably won't know that it was a brain injury. It's really much more common than we realize. So it will come as no surprise to you that the brain is the most important organ in our body. It controls everything we do: breathing, walking, talking, thinking, behaving, and feeling. I like to start off with a definition of what a brain injury is. There are a lot of myths and misconceptions when it comes to traumatic brain injury. These are kind of the textbook definitions. A traumatic brain injury is an insult to the brain caused by an external physical force. The first thing we might think about is something like falling downstairs or a car crash. But if you can envision that kind of jolt, you know, like that front and back motion that happens in a car crash or falling down falling down steps. Traumatic brain injuries can range from mild to severe, but by far the most common traumatic brain injury is a concussion. And you will hear throughout this presentation, you will hear me use the term concussion or mild traumatic brain injury. Those are synonyms. a concussion is a mild traumatic brain injury, and about 70% of traumatic brain injuries are concussions. So that's just, I think there are a lot of myths and misconceptions when it comes to traumatic brain injury and concussion. You will hear people say, well, how could it have been a concussion? I didn't lose consciousness. You don't have to lose consciousness for it to be a concussion. So I think that traumatic brain injury is something, if we can think of or envision that kind of, that jolt, that front and back motion with our head. And when we think about, you know, how cars did used to, and years ago, they did not even have headrests. So we would, of course, want to do whatever we could to avoid that kind of front and back motion in the head when it comes to car crashes. But falling downstairs also is a very common cause. What you see below is the definition of acquired brain injury, which is defined as an injury to the brain that has occurred after birth, anytime at all, with any age, children, youth, teens, adults, seniors, anytime at all. These are more medical causes, the acquired brain injury, and this is just a short list of the reasons why an acquired brain injury would take place: stroke, brain tumor, aneurysm, seizures, infections, overdose of alcohol or drugs, loss of oxygen, exposure to lead, exposure to carbon monoxide. There's a very long list of why a trauma or how a traumatic, an acquired brain injury occurs. Most of my comments tonight are going to be relate to the intersection of mild traumatic brain injury or concussion and domestic violence. But these are two terms that you see often in the research and the literature. Most of tonight's comments are really going to be related to the prevention of mild traumatic brain injury or concussion. And so this is a similar list to that of what I just explained, that brain injuries can happen as a result of these lack of oxygen, stroke, infections to the brain, toxic exposure, blunt or penetrating trauma. And that what I'd mentioned to you, that front and back motion with our head, that's called acceleration, deceleration forces. So I'm going to get into a little bit more detail with you about the difference between a mild, moderate, and severe traumatic brain injury. I'll give you a couple of details. An individual who sustains a mild traumatic brain injury, remember it's a synonym for a mild traumatic brain injury and a concussion. Those are synonyms. And these are the symptoms that you may see. It comes after a loss of consciousness up to 30 minutes, but there does not have to be a loss of consciousness. There may be any of these symptoms: vomiting, dizziness, memory loss, fatigue. And mild traumatic brain injury does not appear on an MRI or a CAT scan, but we do highly recommend anybody that believes that they've had a concussion or a mild traumatic brain injury to visit their doctor, their health professional, or emergency department in their local hospital to determine if it was a traumatic brain injury. As far as a moderate injury, an individual who sustains a moderate brain injury, they may experience these contusion or bleeding on or within the brain. They may be unconscious for up to 24 hours, and there may be signs of brain trauma. The symptoms may last for months, or they may be permanent, and the injuries may be seen on a CAT scan or an MRI. And the definition of a severe traumatic brain injury, I'll read to you these three items. The person may experience a state of unconsciousness for more than 24 hours. There may be signs of injury on neuroimaging tests, and the person may experience post-traumatic confusion or amnesia. The effect is obviously more significant the person, there may be improvement that is seen, but often the person is left with permanent physical, cognitive, and behavioral impairments. And then, as I'd mentioned to you before, these are the leading causes of brain injury. The number one a cause of brain injury is falls. Second cause, most common cause, is motor vehicle crashes. That has changed over the last 10 to 20 years ago, 20 years, many years ago, the number one cause of traumatic brain injury was motor vehicle crashes. There are, however, these days, there are so many standard safety features that come in cars. If you look at your dashboard, there's a lot of bells and whistles that come standard in your car. You don't have to ask a car salesman for the standard safety equipment that saves lives. For instance, I'm a careful driver. I have a small Honda Civic. I have something that comes up on my dashboard that says lane departure warning. And I'm a careful driver. If I drive over the white lines in the highway, that one comes up once in a while. So that has changed. The number one cause is falls. The number two cause now is motor vehicle crashes. The number three cause, as you see with these four icons, the number three cause is assaults. And the number four cause is being struck by or against an object. Again, another reason why the Brain Injury Alliance of New Jersey has decided to educate and inform community groups, school groups, professional audiences. We're happy to increase public and professional awareness of this topic. This is a map of the United States. As I mentioned to you, brain injury is sometimes called a hidden disability, or it's a silent epidemic. You can't look at someone and know that they have a traumatic brain injury. There are cognitive issues having to do with memory loss, attention, concentration, fatigue. The statistics show that in New Jersey, about 12,000 to 15,000 people sustain a traumatic brain injury each year. And these are underestimates. As I mentioned to you, a lot of people don't go to the doctor or the ER in their local hospital. So these statistics, we do consider that these statistics are, it's underreported, undertreated, underdiagnosed, underreported. And about 1,000 of these each year are fatal. So we're happy to bring public and professional awareness to this. And we believe it's better to talk about it than not to talk about it. We don't want to sweep the problem under the rug. Okay, I think we're okay. But those are high statistics. And then again, another reason for the Brain Injury Alliance of New Jersey to take our show on the road, talk to audiences about this important topic. Brain injury, here's also something about the relationship about why did the Brain Injury Alliance of New Jersey decide to put this presentation together. If you look at the right side of the slide, some things to think about. Where do we know of anybody? We also thought we may have some callers, some viewers of this session who are working in the social service industry. They might be helping people with all sorts of aspects of their life. And they might say they think they might know somebody who they have worked with or on their caseload, or someone that they are assisting who has sustained a brain injury due to domestic violence. So something to think about for the general public, as well as for if you are a person working in the social service industry or know of somebody, friend, loved one, next door neighbor, relative who has had any of these events happen during their lives. Objects striking against their head, the person was pushed against a wall or other surface, they were pushed downstairs, they were violently, somebody violently was shaking them, or possible strangulation. And a victim of domestic violence may suffer a brain injury without knowing it. If they had no severe trauma, no obvious symptoms at first, no loss of consciousness, or received no medical care. So we think it's important to sort of bring this issue to the surface. Here are some other pretty high statistics about the link, issues linking or the intersection of traumatic brain injury and domestic violence. So the first statistic is 60 to 92% of victims sustain injuries due to the head and face. About 68% of victims will suffer near fatal strangulation at the hands of their partner. And the third statistic is that only 34% of people injured by intimate partners receive medical care for their injuries. So of course, there another reason for bringing this topic up for greater public awareness as well as professional awareness. And then what we could say, well, why don't people seek help? So victims are often alone after they are injured and often cannot seek medical care for injuries due to their own safety, due to isolation, or economic reasons. Brain injury may impede a victim's ability to seek help. Details surrounding the incident don't surface right away, or there's also a misconception that a hit on the head isn't problematic unless you lose consciousness. As I mentioned to you before, there are some myths and misconceptions regarding traumatic brain injury. You don't have to lose consciousness to have a traumatic brain injury. And then this chart just shows you all of the ways brain injury can make it more difficult if you know of someone or if you are working with someone who has had concussion or multiple concussions. These are just some of the areas that can be affected. Difficulty engaging in educational opportunities, accessing service providers, adapting to living in a shelter, just going around the circle here, removing themselves from the abusive environment. They might have difficulty creating and sustaining a safety plan. They might have difficulty assessing potential dangers. And they might have gain and retain job. Might have difficulty gaining and retaining jobs and financial stability. So it really affects a lot of aspects of one's life. And why do we do these kinds of presentations? Well, we're hoping to increase awareness about the topic. It's possible that we can identify, if we're talking to general audiences or if we're talking to social service, people who work in the social service industry, the general public might be able to identify people who they already know or who they are working with that may have had a brain injury, that we want the general public to become more knowledgeable about brain injury and appropriate resources that are available. I'll tell you a little bit again at the end about the free services of the Brain Injury Alliance of New Jersey. We hope that we are offering an understanding and support to people who have a brain injury as well as his or her family. We hope to provide assistance and accommodations or connect people with whatever resources are available, especially in the social service industry if somebody is in need of assistance, and develop agency protocols. We want to encourage other agencies working in the social service industry, if they should come across someone that they're concerned about, who has had a loss of consciousness or who has had multiple traumatic brain injuries, we want to get them the right resources. We want to put them in touch with the right people. If we do speak to professional audiences, we can offer things like this to them, to anybody working in the social service industry, some screening tools regarding people that not going to read this video, I'll leave it up for a second, in case we know of someone who we believe has had concussions, a series of concussions or traumatic brain injury. We think that these are important questions. And when assisting someone who have, again, I'll leave this up for a moment for you. In case we know of someone who has had a concussion or a series of concussions, we want to make sure that, and they are seeking some kind of social services, help for themselves or their families, that we would want some of these things to be in place to, to greater assist them. And then there's professionals out there who can make the diagnosis. As I said, we are not medical professionals at the Brain Injury Alliance of New Jersey, but there are people who specifically can diagnose a traumatic brain injury or concussion. A neuropsychologist, they can assess the relationship between the brain, behavior, and cognition, things like attention, memory, and concentration, things that we may take for granted. And a neuropsychiatrist can prescribe medications for managing behavioral problems and symptoms. So we think it's important to refer if we do come across someone who is in need. I'm happy to share with you, and I'm going to hold up this brochure. It's a free brochure of that the Brain Injury Alliance of New Jersey produced about a year ago. There are two versions. I brought with me 5 or 6 of this version. This is Intimate Partner Violence / Domestic Violence and Brain Injury, What Survivors Need to Know. And it's a 5 or 6 page glossy brochure. And then there's another version about what professionals need to know. As I said, we speak to groups of 5, we speak to groups of 50 statewide. We're happy to be able to produce publications based on research, give them out to audiences. I do have a few copies I brought with me tonight, or we can make, if anybody gives me their email address, we can get this to you digitally. No problem. I wanted to tell you also a little bit about our organization. Why are we doing that? Why is the Brain Injury Alliance of New Jersey doing these kinds of programs and services? Just a few slides about what we are doing and why we are doing it. We provide direct services to people who have had a brain injury, mild, moderate, or severe, as well as services to their families and caregivers. We have free support groups statewide, also on a hybrid version where there are in-person meetings, hybrid Zoom, where it would be Zoom and in person, and also Zoom caregiver support groups. We do prevention education seminars on any topic related to brain injury for any group, families, school groups, youth groups, faith-based organizations, mental health organizations regarding prevention education, bike helmet safety, pedestrian safety, pool safety, transportation safety, a pretty wide variety of topics. And if you look at our website, www.BIANJ, there's a very long list of the types of prevention education seminars we can provide. Everything is free of charge. Also, as I'd mentioned to you, we do impact educators. We have relationships with schools, with school nurses, with gym teachers, athletic trainers. We're a resource to people that might have students that they're working with that they are concerned with, or if the students have been diagnosed with concussion or series of concussions and traumatic brain injury. And we also have a team of people that do advocacy and legislative issues. We want, as I mentioned to you earlier, to increase public and professional awareness about brain injury, how to prevent brain injury, and how laws and legislation can be modified to increase access to services and so on. This is also just a little bit more detail about the Brain Injury Alliance of New Jersey. When I mentioned to you that we do direct support services, we have a team of people called case managers. And if they call our agency, again, a free service that's free of charge. If they call our agency, they are assigned a case manager. We do have bilingual case managers, and we will help direct whatever needs that person. We'll try to assess what that person needs to improve their quality of life. Are they having difficulty accessing medical or rehab services? Are they having difficulty accessing educational services for their child? And we really act on their behalf as part of a team. And we will also refer, there is I have a slide for you coming up about the TBI fund, which is a payer of last resort for items that insurance won't pay for. In New Jersey, we're fortunate the TBI fund will pay for. And I would encourage you call the helpline, which you see posted on this slide, that 800 number. And it's a team of people who are incredibly resourceful. They are able to point families and individuals with brain injury in the right direction. Again, if you know of anybody who's in need of a support group or a caregiver support group, call that 800 number. And we also have one of our signature programs. We've got a 1-week sleepaway camp in South Jersey called Camp Trek for age 18 and older who have had a brain injury. And it's a fun time had by all. It's an actual sleepaway camp in a very rustic part of South Jersey. Everybody has a great time. The parents and families have a week off to do whatever they need to do to relax, to vacation themselves, and the adult with the brain injury enjoys the 1 week of sleepaway camp with their peers, also age 18 and older. It's a wonderful experience for anybody that attends. I did mention to you the TBI fund. It's something unusual, really, that's occurring in New Jersey. It administered by the New Jersey Department of Human Services, Division of Disability Services, and this is their brochure, and that is their 800 number. But it provides an opportunity for New Jersey residents with traumatic brain injury to purchase and access brain injury related services and supports they need to live in the community. And as I said, it is the payer of last resort. It's for items that the insurance will not cover. There are liberal eligibility requirements. And if you know of anybody who has had a brain injury and dealing with quality of life issues, it's definitely worth looking into the supports and services that the TBI fund will cover. Will cover the cost. As far as the educational services that the Brain Injury Alliance can provide, we have webinars all year round on a variety of topics, free workshops, regional trainings. We have one coming up in March in 3 different dates, North, Central, and South, in a location like this, like in a library, open to the public, open to human services and healthcare providers and professionals, free of charge. The topic this March, 3 locations, 3 libraries, is pediatrics and children. We have an annual professional seminar in May when over 300 rehab professionals will be coming for their education and coursework and their continuing education. And we have a full day, usually in June, called Family Fest, where families of people with brain injury get together for support, for education. Again, a good time had by all, and also some meaningful relationships and peers, get together to learn, to have fun, enjoy the day, and share lived experience about being a parent or a family member. As I'd mentioned to you, if you're a person who likes to poke around on the internet or you're interested in this subject, BIANJ.org is our website. It's jam-packed with flyers, videos, fact sheets. If you wanted to learn more or take a deeper dive, please feel free to learn more about us on our website. If you should know of anybody, a family member, friend, relative, next door neighbor, who is in need of resources, there's a a wonderful team of people that man that phone, that resources helpline. It's a free service, 800-669-4323. Again, if you like to check out social media, we have tons of information always available, always getting it out to the public. We have an electronic monthly newsletter called e-news that's jam-packed with information about upcoming events, educational opportunities, and so on. So I think that I'm going to conclude with that. I was going to ask our host, Maritza from the library, if there were any questions in the chat from people who were looking at this presentation from.
We do have a couple of questions.
Great, thank you.
First one, if you don't mind just repeating the question, that way it can be heard on the recording.
Sure, I'll repeat the question for those of you who are listening to the recording.
So it goes, how long does it take to get all the damage, brain damage?
It's really hard to answer that question. They do say, since most of the traumatic brain injuries are concussions, that between 1 to 3 months, all of the symptoms may resolve. Not all of the symptoms will come. Some people, we hear people say weeks go by, they didn't have any symptoms right after the fall or the car crash or the injury, and then weeks later, some of the symptoms come up. So that's a difficult to put a time limit on that. Any questions, of course, as I said when I started out, is ask your healthcare professional if you're really concerned about symptoms. Thank you.
Another question, how can they speak with a social worker assistant?
How could they speak with a social worker?
Yeah, so how can they reach?
Oh, the best way would be, thank you, that's a great question. The best way would be to call the helpline at the Brain Injury Alliance for New Jersey that you see on the screen right now, 800-669-4323. Just tell them what the problem is, either that you're experiencing or the people that you know, or it could be your next door neighbor, friend, or relative. And the people that you'll be speaking to on the helpline will sort of point you in the right direction. If you're interested in case management, our care management program is statewide. There is no cost. But a professional who's knowledgeable about brain injury will speak to you on the phone, or of course you could email us at info@bianj.org if that's easier. And we'd love to help you, point you in the right direction, and connect you to whatever community resources, rehab services, medical services, social services that you would benefit from.
That was
info@bianj.org. info@bianj.org. Either call the helpline or email us. It's probably the best way to get in touch with us.
Do we have any questions in person?
Anybody?
I was wondering if, like, child,
From a
and the
child.
baby, like, let's say, fell down the stairs.
Yes.
But there's no apparent injuries right away or later.
It's a
Does
common-
that affect anything?
It's a common question, yes. I mean, of course, with a child, if there is a fall, the question from the audience was if there was a child that fell down steps. But if there's a child that falls, hits their head, there's a loss of consciousness, of course, get the child checked out, whatever.
There's no unconsciousness.
Even if there's no unconsciousness, get the check. I think it's better to get a medical diagnosis if it was a concussion, if it was a traumatic brain injury, other than just sweeping the problem under the rug and make, because some of the symptoms might not show up for a few
But
weeks.
let's say it's been 3 decades ago.
I'm sorry?
Let's say it was 3 decades ago.
Oh, 3 decades ago.
Yeah.
It's hard to say, because it is a hidden disability. They also say silent epidemic. There are many people now, we speak to audiences statewide, that they say when they were a child, just like what you were saying, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they had a fall downstairs or they had a car crash and it was never diagnosed. And now they're having cognitive issues, memory issues. It's hard to pinpoint that the reason why they're having cognitive issues now, memory issues, concentration, and attention issues, is because they fell 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It's very hard to make that correlation. It is possible, but it's very hard to just directly say that the reason why they're having the problems now is because they fell downstairs 30 years ago. It's very hard to make that link, but it is possible. And what we always say is that prevention is the best message that we can, prevention, keeping safe, so it would come as no surprise to you that the Brain Injury Alliance recommends, guards on the window, so people that live in apartment buildings that, heaven forbid, the children should fall out of the window, or, at the top of the steps when you have a toddler or a grandchild, a relative coming over, if there's a gate at the bottom and then there's a gate at the top of the steps. We have so many safety suggestions. It would come as no surprise to you. Children are, if you have a pool in the backyard, you need a gate around so that the child, God forbid, heaven forbid, should have a near drowning experience. There are so many things that we can do. We believe that are sort of low cost or no cost safety things around the house, that can prevent traumatic brain injuries and falls. That's really the prevention is really the best message when it comes to prevention of concussion and prevention of traumatic brain injury. But great question.